A little bit about myself. In 1995, I opened up my own art school because just before that, I decided I didn't want to paint portraits anymore. This is about sharing the one thing that has me painting again, that makes painting fun and exciting. My first year back painting, I was starting to take commissions again. Well, it took a few years, and then I started to take commissions and I posted it on Facebook. And then all of a sudden I started to get judges and different people to do portraits of. And then this opportunity of painting President Carter arrived. And the painting is much stronger in real life. It looks pretty bright blue in this background. The reason I started painting, though, is about art mapping. So let me start over here. My wife is forcing me to show you my rosemary brush. We don't make any money, so I don't know why she's so proud of that. I did the Sargent portrait, or the series of paintings and drawings of President Carter, and we have a few more we're going to reveal to them shortly. I used to paint old masters. This is a copy of a Bouguereau I did years ago. And I do all these old masters, and a person of faith, so I love the religious paintings and the gold leaf. But really, I've been a teacher for 25 years, and we've had so many people, probably 40 people in art magazines, on the cover of art magazines. And then the people today, you all, Megan McCall, I knew her as Megan Berner, and her drawing now was a finalist with the Portrait Society, and she was also a finalist, I think, with ARC, and I think ARC purchased this drawing. It's just a beautiful drawing. You all know Shiva. Shiva was in the, something about Megan I didn't tell you is Megan drove from Chattanooga to Sandy Springs for, I think, close to 4 years. That's 3 hours and 45 minutes each way, every other week for class. And then when she moved to Birmingham, she was so excited it'd be less than 3 hours, only to find out they could only find a house on the other end of Birmingham and had the same length of a drive. Shiva was in the class for I don't know how long. I think early on, I think he had drawn alone, Home Alone, and not much. And I know Megan's going to watch this later, so I do want to say something about this and with Shiva, because I gave a talk on Sargent years ago, and I don't want to cover those things again for any of the people who saw that. But when I finished the talk, Shiva was sitting down with his notes, and he said to me, I know all these things. How come I don't do them? And he looked at him, like I was going to give some reason, like, I don't know why you're following what you've been taught. But I noticed in this painting, he is doing what he's supposed to do. And that's the thing I want to say to Shiva is, just because you're not in class anymore doesn't mean I'm not looking at your figure ground relationship and how you're losing and finding and why you're losing an edge and finding an edge. So I am checking you people, even when you leave the class. I think a lot of you know Catherine Schuber, and beautiful touch, an amazing drawing. She did this out of the classroom, and just an amazing person. Catherine didn't go to college. She did high school and art, and high school and college art in my class. She didn't do college art. She did it with me. And just a wonderful person. And you all know Dylan, and Dylan was in the class for about 10 years. And, it's hard to show my work when what I've been doing is teaching, and I get my pride from that, and the 10-year-olds are learning how to draw, and I sat down for this little girl's drawing, this 10-year-old, and it was spot on. I mean, I looked at Elephant and I said, I can't believe you did that. So let me go ahead and start the talk this way. How did it all start for me? I used to go around the museum saying that I knew everything. I'm better than you. I can make it more realistic than you. So I ignore half of these people in the museums. Gosh, I wish I could have those years over again. And it all started in Boston when I saw the portrait of Mrs. Boyd here on the left. And I said to myself, my gosh, I'll never do this. This was so powerful. And this photo does it absolutely no justice. And now that they put it behind glass, there's no justice there either, because you can't see the texture and the brushstrokes. It's a painting in Braille behind glass, so you can't feel the thickness. And when I just stared at this painting for 2 hours, I started to calm down and realize, wait a minute, he's applying principles that I know. And he's just raised the bar. Okay, so it was a big bar, but that's all he's done is raise the bar. We can do this. No, I didn't really think that, but I wasn't down for the challenge or up or something. The next painting I saw the next day was at the Fogg Museum. And I realized that he wasn't necessarily following all the drawing rules that I knew. And he was selectively finding edges that he would have you look at. But the painting that really caught my eye was this one. You see, simple drawing rules that we learned early on is, well, everything's lighter, closer to you, darker, farther away. And there's an understanding that sometimes the light source isn't there. But Sargent knows that things are lighter with more contrast closer to me. I mean, it's very easy to look at. I'm going to pull up the annotate. You know, Sargent is aware of this. Oh, my pen's not working. I always mark it up. I bought a new Wacom tablet and it and I are not getting along. So I'll just use my mouse. So right in here, he has more contrast and it's lighter and his highlights will gradually get darker farther away. So he understands all this. Why would he paint this so white? And the only thing I can come up with is that this is about a scene of them in the alleyway, alone and secluded. And it could also even have a little seediness to it because it's so dark and the light is showing that dark. And the flatness of the figure when we've all learned how to make things look realistic. And here he's just having this silhouetted shape represent what he needs. That bothered me when this painting was so realistic here. Oops. And all of a sudden here it's flat. Why would Sargent, who has the ability to make it more realistic than anyone I've ever seen, paint something flat? And that began my exploration and the start of what's going on in art. So in the next 25 years, I start copying one old master after another, all of the Soroyas, all of the Sargents. I probably have 70 to 80 Sargent videos that I've recorded, 10 to 15 Soroya videos, and I don't know how many Velasquez's and other artists. That's all I've done is make videos on artists looking for what they've done or how they figure this out and try to say what's going on in this. So when I look at this drawing here by Soroya and I'm looking at this, I'm giving my tablet another chance before I yell at it. Nope, that's touch. Okay, the tablet should be working. There we go. This area of the painting for Soroya, can you see the word sun?
Yes.
Okay, it represents the sun. This area represents the shade. They're in long sleeve shirts, so it's not too hot and it's not too cold. And yet they're underneath some kind of covering. And the door here is saying it's sunny outside. And what I'm going to get at here in a minute is Soroya in this particular painting, and he may not do it for all paintings, is designating a purpose for each area of the painting. This area is an area of calm, because your eye needs calm in a painting. This area says it's sunny. Oops, didn't mean to do that. This area means it's sunny, and that's what the shade is showing the difference between. and then he ties it together. So he takes a little of the yellow colors to make it look warm. He has to have some of the cool colors. But if you have too much cool, this area won't be warm. So there's just enough cool to make this warm. He has to have just enough dark to make this look light. Because without the darks, you don't get light. I don't know how many times I say to myself, I've made it white and it doesn't look white. Well, the area next to it's not dark enough. And then over here to harmonize, he has to show that this is cool. This is the part in shadow, and he has to have enough sun to make this look cool. Too much sun, and it's all a sunny place. He's telling a story. The complementary colors are making it beautiful with the yellow and violet complements and the red and greens. And again, if you can't make this area look light, then let's put something dark next to it. All right, what color dark should this be? How does the painting change if this is a blue-brown instead of a brown, or a blue-gray? Does it make it more winter? Does it make it cooler? What's it do? Well, the brown gives it a warmth. And it's almost like a friendly warmth. And again, whenever you have an area light and you want it light, then you have to put the dark next to it to make it look light. Everything that's dark in this area, even going lighter to darker this way, is to make that light look light. Soroya's painting is orchestrated to tell a story. Nothing's by accident in this painting. I don't know prior to looking at that, and to be honest, I don't know if I do it now, even though I know I'm supposed to. I don't know if I look at areas of my painting and say, there's a purpose for this section of my painting. Do you deliver that purpose for me as I'm talking to the canvas? Or am I just painting? You see, I think art's about telling a story. That's what I think. And that's what's changed in my art today. So all of a sudden now I'm looking at Sargent, and this year, or I don't know when we started to maybe last year, we started to go through Sargent's life. So we started at 17 and we painted everything Sargent painted. And at 18, at 19, at 20, 21, and we're looking for Sargent's journey. And Duran is Sargent's teacher. Now keep in mind, Sargent has the French Academy for half of the day, teaching him how to measure accurately, the touch point drawing, how to do the dot-to-dot measuring, learning how to refine his touch and his eye. And Duran is saying, let's not draw it in, let's use a brush. And Duran is taking biblical themes and he's twisting it a little bit. And he's telling Sargent, put yourself in that theme. And that's where I'm headed here. The art mapping is about you understanding what this is about, why you're painting this, and feel it and understand it and become part of it. So this is Joseph and Mary and the Christ child fleeing from Egypt. So look at everything you paint as a photograph. Imagine you see in this picture. What would you see in this picture? You would see his eyes, his mouth, his ears. I hope you're okay with my drawing. I stayed at a Holiday Inn Express and I thought I could teach art because of it. You know, you have Mary and the baby and the donkey, you know, and he's got stripes, and Mary's wearing a polo jacket with stripes and it's got buttons on it, you know, and he's wearing a vest underneath his jacket with a tie. I mean, we put everything in the picture, don't we, Anne? Right? And we need to stop. So what Sargent's doing is he's saying, I only need what I need to tell the message. Duran's quote, everything that is not indispensable is harmful. If you don't need it, it's going to hurt you. So Sargent has this, if you squint, what's it like at night? You're leaving your family right here, everyone you know. What does light represent for you? This is his family. This is acceptance. This is everything in his life, their life. And now he's in charge. I hope that didn't politically get incorrect, but back then he was in charge and he's leading them down this path into the wilderness where they're going to find refuge in the camp of their enemies. And the light is going down and each step is getting darker and it's brown. Why brown? It's the desert. There's nothing green growing here. This is not, you know, Joshua crossing the river saying, oh gosh, there's the fruit is this big, we need to go. That's not what's going on here. Every step into the wilderness, into the rocks and the jaggedness, there's almost like you could fall at any time. Sargent put himself in this position. So when you look at the Capri and the lady from Capri, the girl from Capri, you know, he's painting this quintessential moment. My volume's not loud enough. Is that better?
I can hear you. So did somebody say that?
Yeah, could you possibly turn up the volume on your microphone? So is that okay?
I can hear well, so I don't know.
Oh, they might turn the volume up on their phone.
Yes.
Okay. So so what's happened now with Capri is Sargent is searching for that moment. You know, in college as a photographer, I used to be a photographer where I traveled the world as a missions photographer. At times I would go to Pakistan and Haiti, and I've been to Bangladesh and Dubai and all these different places. And I don't know how many times I've been to Haiti. And I would always take photos and bring it back and then edit them and give it to them for free. And I'd pay for my trip. I think that's why they had me go, because I was free. It wasn't that I was any good. But what I was always looking for is, what is this moment in time? What's capturing this moment? So in Sargent's painting, he's looking for this dancer, and here's the scene he paints, and here he is again. And Sargent ends up with the girl on the roof. Now, I have to give all the credit to Richard Ormond. Richard Ormond has taught me to slow down and to look. And you know what's sad about that sentence? Now, this is a brilliant author. He's authored all of the Sargent books. I don't know if there's 18 of them, 300 pages each, you know, and I own them all. And I always looked at the pictures, but honestly, it wasn't until a few years ago I started reading the books. And I don't, you know, it's kind of funny in the beginning, it used to just kill me, you know, when he'd say the girl's wearing a pink dress and there's a white house behind him. And then there she's got a little blue in her hair and there's a tambourine. And he'd go into this length about she's holding a pencil and they made the pencil in Egypt and she was bringing it over here. And there's a man in Egypt who would then paint it for her, write his name on it. And he'd go into page after page of describing everything about this picture. And I kept wondering, how come I don't look at a painting like he does? I'm doing this for a living and he does his version for a living, but I'm painting, and that's not different than what he does. It's just that I should look at things like that. I should research like this, and I don't. And he got me to start reading. And as I started to reading, this is about the dance. And I don't know how to say it or what it is. It's like an old folklore from Naples, Italy. And it's like Tartaluda or something, you know, tarantula or something. I don't know what it is. And it's a folk dance, and it's a very classical thing. And there's a letter this man who was with Sargent who wrote it back about it to a friend, and he says, oh yeah, I'll remember this night forever. She was on the dance, just dancing, and it's a silhouette of her dancing at sunset, and the music, it'll be a memory in my mind. And that's what Sargent's showing you, a memory that'll last forever. Do we paint portraits that are a memory forever of capturing that one moment in time? So what's this about? Well, look at the blurriness of this girl's dress. Can you see how blurry this is?
Was it the tarantella, Chris?
Yes, thank you. So here's the blurriness. See how soft that edge is? See how sharp that is? You see, psychologically, we read left to right. You know, we go here and we do this in a hurry. Oops, I want to clear that. Okay. We're also going to the figure. We're going to any figure in a painting. So if you have a landscape and you put a figure in there, we're going right there. I don't care if you have zero contrast. That's where we're going. So Sargent knows this has a certain amount of visual weight, but it's also about the song because he puts his greatest contrast right here. And the sharp line makes that look soft, kind of like a camera blurring in front of you as you turn and twist. That's deliberate. And he's playing the two against them. It's the dance and the music going together. You like this, Anne? You know? So it's about a moment in time that you're trying to capture. So early on, Sargent's in Italy. And, you know, it's a painting that I want the class to paint. And they're like looking at me thinking I'm nuts. And I'm saying, it's beautiful. So let's break it down. Okay. It's a Gothic church. It's not high Gothic. We know it's Gothic because it's got the little pointy things at the top, but it doesn't have all the curly Q stuff that makes it high Gothic. What's the introduction from Gothic from Romanesque churches? It's the stained glass. You see, it's the beginning of letting light into the church. So God's light will now enter into the church. And it's about these steps taking you to heaven, bringing God's light down in. And Sargent is in the basement. So imagine this. They're all outside painting. He's got a group of his people. They're all painting plein air. And he's in the basement. He's late. And he's running up the stairs. And he says, wait a minute. I don't have to go outside to paint the outside of the church. This is the church. This is the quintessential. If you put a photograph of Gothic churches in an art history book, this is it. I'll ask you a question. Simplicity, complexity. Do I need that there's marble all over the floor here? Nope, not at all, especially not for Gothic. Right? It's simple. It's everything simple. The plaster simple, just a hint of directional line, that radial line leading me where to go, just enough pattern to get my eye to follow. That's all I need. It's a beautiful painting. So when I go back to Durand saying to Sargent, only put in what you need and leave everything else out. It's a beautiful painting. So a little bit about myself. How come I pick? Oh, there it is. A little bit about myself. I've been studying Sargent for 25 years now. And my wife and I we used to do this counseling for people in halfway homes. Well, we facilitated. And they were people who were out of prison and they're transitioning from prison to normal society. And we've got heavy into counseling. And in the process, we also came across something from a dear friend of ours at the National Institute of Marriage. And they had something called the Hopes, Wants, and Desires. It's called, it's an intensive from Chick-fil-A puts it on, and it's spectacular. So this is a plug for them because this changes my art. And this is what I want you to see. So what happens with this is, so here's their plug. They do about 4 or 5 couples a week for the last 40 years. People who are getting divorced and it's over, and you basically have 4 days to heal their marriage. Their success rate is 98%. You know, that's a high number. I mean, I think that's a high number. And this is what they said. They said that it's about communications, that each person has certain words, and that's what you're looking for when someone's speaking. So one of my big words is significance. I want to have meaning and purpose. When I'm actually saying the opposite word, the fear word, I feel unimportant. That's when whoever's talking to me has to use this in my life in a way that's real. It can't be made up. So a while back, our daughter said to me, "You don't know me," and she's in her 20s. And I'm thinking, I know you better than you know you. And in that case, I was correct. But had she said, "You don't hear me," she would have been correct. You see, when she wanted approval and was fearing condemnation, and I could hear that in some of her words or sentences that she was using, what she wanted from me was this. Now, I hope my wife's not listening, but I think she is. I know we're supposed to be learning at this retreat how to do things, and we could help others, and we could, use it in our marriage and our family and our kids. And unfortunately, I couldn't stop thinking about art. This is what art was missing. You see, if you have, or since you have 3, 4, 5 of these words or 70 of these words, and these are yours, what if you use only the art tools, art tool like contrast and how much, color and color theories, and you use these color theories and these art tools in a way that would help you communicate the message like Duran is telling Sargent, and leave out everything that is abortive. And therefore, you having a voice and telling your story. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So let me keep going. So the first painting that I paint is this lady from Haiti. So I have pictures from Italy, they're from everywhere. And I must have 458,000 pictures in my Lightroom catalog. I love taking pictures. That's not counting my iPhotos. We don't even go there. That's a mess. And I decide it's time to start painting again. But this time I'm going to do what I call art mapping. I'm going to take that hopes, wants, and desire list, and I'm going to take every principle of art I know, and I'm going to see which one can I use and put it in the painting. And when I finished this painting, I realized the painting was about me. We call it Light Awakens Darkness. That's my wife's saying, our title. I don't remember what my title was. I think it was more like what it was about for me is this lady on Haiti was on the side of the road and she was selling fruit for $2 a day, and she was waiting for change, and she wasn't doing anything about change. So I call it passively waiting for something in my life to change without doing anything about it. And the light hitting her, the hat is what's putting her in shadow. That's what put in herself. When I finished the painting, I took a 3B pencil and I drew on it because I didn't want to paint more on it. And I made it look like she was incomplete because we're works in progress. And as I started painting the first painting, where I had this list, this little boy I called passively waiting. You see, he was an orphan in Haiti and he'd lost his parents and he's very young, and he's wanting to ask for help, but he's afraid to. And in this one, it's called a step of faith. He was going to have to step out and ask for help. I was saying I wanted to show everyone this. And if I don't paint, people won't listen to me. I'm going to have to show them I might know some of what I'm talking about. And therefore, I was having to step out in faith. These paintings ended up being about me, and I didn't realize it till it was over. That's the neat thing about the art mapping. So some images that I have done since, this is a little charcoal drawing of a client. I'm doing the mother and child. It's 4 or 5 feet tall, grandmother and grandchild together. And I like to do drawings from other angles. of the face to familiarize me with the face. And it's a rather quick charcoal drawing. This is a painting of my wife, probably took about 30 minutes, 35 minutes. And I don't what stirred me. I was looking for her likeness, and this angle of her face shows it best for me. Over the time, I'm jumping around a little bit, but that's okay. I do have a plan and we'll get there. Over the time, I start painting landscapes and things like that, and little things and just little quick sketches. I'm outside and I'm taking the class plein air painting, and I have to have this picture in here because I thought when we finished, you know, this was somewhere in the middle, I thought it was beautiful, and we had a yard sale, and I'm putting the person who sold my painting for $10 in the picture. This is my wife. She sold my painting for $10. Now, I'm okay with that. Let's get rid of all these unfinished paintings or whatever they are. They're just sketches. I'm good. $10 sort of hurt my feelings a little bit. And, but I've forgiven her and I don't bring it up anymore. But she had her paintings for $400 to $800 in the same yard sale. Now that bothered me. So I need a new broker because this one's not working. So, but she's the sweetest person I know. So, all right. So now, last thing, and then I'm going to start the talk. This is a 14-year-old in the class. She did most of this when she was 13. She just turned 14. Now it's not finished. And honestly, the beard and the mush, the hair and all that is just a nightmare. I don't even know what to tell her to do all this or how to do it. I mean, just a nightmare. And she's developing her sensitivity. She has a great eye, but she's missing certain things. But I think the world of this young lady. I could never draw like this. I mean, I didn't learn how to draw like this until like 3 or 4 years ago. This is like way down the line. And here's my sentence to you. We have all these art schools, these art, what do you call them? Ateliers, where everyone's learning how to paint realistic. It's happening everywhere. I've got 12, 13, 15-year-olds who can draw as well as I can. How are we going to set ourselves apart and be different? And that's where the art mapping comes in. You see, if you use the art tools to tell your words in your painting, then maybe we'll change the brushstroke we use, the brushes we use, the mediums we use, the textures, the canvases, the linens, the sizes, and we'll use it to tell our story. But so often I see artwork, and my own, that looks the same. You can pick an artist and say, oh, I know who that is. I could spot their stuff on Pinterest in a moment across the room. I'm not sure Sargent did that. So many of his paintings were so different. And yes, he has hundreds that are similar, but he has hundreds that are different. And I think we're missing it. So I'm challenging you. And now somehow I have to challenge this young lady who did this drawing to let her know that this is just the beginning of her art career. This is not the end. You know, I have a thirst and a hunger to learn. And that's why I study the old masters. So as I look at this, I have to look at my numbers to see where I'm at. As I look at this, we all know this. This is what transparent colors do. So I put down these horizontal bands, let them dry for 2 weeks, and then I drag transparent colors over it. So look at how well sap green does over certain colors, or look what alizarin does over certain colors, or permanent magenta does over certain colors. And you can see, so when you tone the canvas, you lose the vibrancy of your color. All right, Sargent's in Italy. He's a young kid. I think he's 22 years old, and he paints this scene. So if you're looking at my tone chart here, you would say this is burnt sienna, and Sargent tones this canvas burnt sienna because it's everywhere in the painting and he leaves it. But he does something I've never seen before prior to Sargent. He leaves parts of the tone to evoke his message. What is the message? Is it cold out or hot? Yeah, the kids are frying, right? They're burning like a lobster. You know who we see artists today who do things like this? Kim English, if you've ever seen any of his portraits, it's figurative things, putting the oranges and the reds on the edges of things. This comes from Sargent. Okay, but it's very traditional for the French Academy and the art world to tone their canvas burnt sienna. That's a norm. That's no biggie. But they all did it for 200 years. And then Sargent tones his next painting, I think this gray, because he couldn't get rid of he can put the raw sienna over the gray, but he can't put the gray over the raw sienna. You'd still see it come through. So he tones this one gray and that one orange. See, now I've never seen that before. He's the first artist to change the tone for the painting. These are in the same week. He's in Capri. This is like day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4. Day 3, burnt sienna with alizarin in it and just a little ultramarine blue in it. It's twilight. And it's a transparent color. They've always tried to make their shadows transparent. Next day, oh, there's no green. This is a gray. I don't know if it's in the, I almost think it's this yellowy gray down here that's everywhere. And then he starts painting. Interesting, isn't it? Each one is different. Do we start every painting toning our canvas in a way to capture the message? Or are we in a habit doing it the same way every time? I know, Ann, you're comfortable doing it the same way every time. I like my cereal in a dry bowl on the floor in the same place every morning, and it drives my wife nuts. So this is something in our Thursday Zoom class, and I really like it. I think it's a powerful piece. This is part 1. I'll show part 2 that I think is powerful. This is a Käthe Kollwitz, 1939 German artist, influenced the German Expressionist part of it. Her pieces were so powerful that Hitler had them removed from the museums in the world. And in the first part of the exercise, I asked the class to just shade with no texture, no lines, no strokes, just shade value and shapes. Down here is the original of hers. And then one of our students, Miyuki, did this. So now I asked her, going with the hopes, wants, and desire list, what would it be like for, I'm sorry, I didn't tell you what it was. It's a mother holding her lost child. What would it be like to feel the grieving? How would I know that there's grieving and what's going on? And what I love about her artwork is it isn't just the thick lines here where she sharpened the charcoal and made a thick piece of charcoal with a sharp point so she can make this thick back line and this line. It's the variation of its line. It's the medium thinness. It's the strong line. It's the light line. It's these incredibly light lines for the lips and the nose and the sensitivity to contrast the soft line against the strong line. When you paint, are we making marks and textures that support your hopes, wants, and desire list for that painting? This is a pen and ink I did once. Sargent's charcoal. Saw this in the Washington DC show. It took me an hour and a half to leave the first room of 6 drawings. Needless to say, I spent 6 hours in the drawing section. My wife did the drawing room, the entire Smithsonian. She went to a Starbucks. She saw the Capitol building. She got another Starbucks and came back, and I was just finishing the gallery, and she knew where I'd be. So let me tell you about Mrs. Churchill. So she marries someone I think called Marlborough, one of the wealthiest men in the world. And when you see this thing around her neck, it looks like one of those Delft paintings of a king or a queen. You know, you have that aristocratic money. You're one of the wealthiest people in the world. Sargent doesn't put any of his contrast on her shirt. He doesn't bring any attention to her fame and her position. He says, this is Mrs. Churchill, and she dominates the room. And he uses the silhouetted shape of this head and this dark line on the edge right here. This line right here does not belong. You see, when you shade things 1 to 3, 1 to 4, lighter values, darker, farther away, value 4 isn't that dark on the sunny side because you have a sunny side, you have a medium side, you know, he has a medium dark side, he has a darker side, and he has these different planes that he's shading. Nothing in the background. You see, he can't put dark off the form here because if he puts dark off the form here, he loses the shape of her head, and then we don't know that's Mrs. Churchill. That hairdo, everyone is spotting from all over the place. That line is almost as if he's drawing with charcoal, as if he would use a paintbrush with texture. And he's saying, this is the most powerful person in the room, or this is a person of strength, or this is a person, fill in the blank. And that's what he's saying here with this. You know, what's ironic is he paints her son, Winston Churchill, and I forgot to put him in the picture. He paints her son before he serves in the war. And he's a military man, and he paints Winston Churchill with all his uniform and his outfit and his coat and all his medals and all this stuff, and all the contrast is on his shirt, but not on his face. You see, it's his position he shows in Winston. It's her and not her position in Mrs. Churchill. It's weird because, you know, the portrait of Winston Churchill after he died, the England had him paint it, and the man who painted him was against his party, and he painted, you know, that Churchill may have had a drinking problem, and he painted the drunk. And when the painting was finished, Winston Churchill, they threw out the painting, or there's a rumor they threw it out and burned it. Nobody has record of it. Nobody's seen it. So that rumor might be true. And what happens with Churchill is, oops, I stopped sharing. That wasn't on purpose. I was clicking someone coming on. Okay. So what happened with Churchill is he told the man said, I don't know what I did wrong. And Churchill said, you painted the man and not the position. You see, Sargent, before, in 1925, was before World War II, Sargent painted the man in his position. He painted his coat and his outfit, or drew it in charcoal. And here he's painting the mom as this lady with power and strength and not her position, and painted Churchill the opposite, long before it became a big issue. Quite powerful. So for me, this is about learning to see what you're looking for and capture it. So why am I here today? I quit painting for 25 years. I allowed this lie that I'm not good enough, I don't measure up, or something's missing in my art. Well, the missing in my art was I was putting everything in the painting. There was no purpose to my painting. There was no story. There was no hopes, wants, and desire words that were mine in my painting. And I allowed that to cause me to feel like I wouldn't succeed, I wouldn't measure up, and I'm not good enough. So I spend all these years looking for the recipe, the palettes, the videos, the books. There's something I'm missing, and what is it? You know, I don't know about you guys, but I have a hard time starting. I can eat half of the cabinet before I start. And when you have a food allergy like I do, it makes me feel not very good. And then I can't paint because I don't feel good. And I almost feel like it's on purpose. But once I start, I can't stop. It's the weirdest thing. I'm looking at the pictures to the right, so I'm not looking straight because the pictures are on the right. So sorry about that. I've noticed that about this. How about for commissions? You're afraid to show the client the piece. Is that the hardest thing? You finished it, now you got to show them. How about, are you ever afraid that, you know, you never know when you're done, or maybe when the deadline's up, you're done or finished? I should say done. It's like a steak, it's done. So for me, what's happened is once I start asking the client their hopes, wants, desired words, and I put these words in their painting somewhere, this is what my chart looks like. I do a drawing. I'm going to go through some of the steps, and I do these steps, and every time I answer a question, I write it down, and I keep writing it down. And I can have this is an 18 by 24 sketch pad, and sometimes I wish it was twice as big. But by the time I finish, I know exactly what it's about, and I know what to do. And I'm finished when I have just enough in that Gothic cathedral that says, that's it. I've captured that moment in time that captures that Gothic cathedral. That child sleeping or whatever you're painting, I've captured it. This has changed my life and my art, and I want to share it with the world. Now, so let's see how I can put a 3-day talk into 25 minutes. So it doesn't matter what I paint. You know, this was the start of something. I've cut most of it off and I'm doing this. A really dear friend of mine, one of the nicest people you'll ever meet in your life. You all know Dylan Scott Pierce. I think he's one of the greatest watercolorists to ever live. He can juxtapose color and control the watercolor like no one I've ever seen. So many of the great watercolorists use some kind of opaque white to fix their mistakes. Dylan had to practice how to make a mistake once because he needed a backwash, and it was in this painting. He actually used, was it this painting? Yeah, I think it was. He created a backwash somewhere in the painting. I don't think I have a good photo here is what it might be. Dylan will have to answer that one, but we'll skip it. But so what happens is the art mapping asked me to do all these little sketches. And in the sketches, every time you're doing something, you continue to write down, what is it? What is it? Why is this important? Why is that important? You're after the why over and over again. And by the time you finish all your sketches and you really have narrowed down what it's about, and there's a purpose for the laundry, then it's time to start to do the formal drawing and some painting sketches. And I thought this was neat. I was on Dylan's website a little while ago and I saw he had his wall in one of the rooms and he has all his art mapping stuff up. See, I keep it up. Dylan, I didn't tell Dylan this, but I have this giant gator board that I put to the left of my easel, and it has all of my sketches and painting sketches next to it. And it's a reminder of what this painting's about for me to be on track. You see, the client answers these questions that I'm going to kind of go through with you in a minute. And they're going to tell me what to do. And then when I'm finished the painting, it's because it's their painting that they hired me to do, and I'm involved, but it's their painting. And I don't want to get off on the tangent a little bit. So this is, you know, he's right. This is actually part of his journal when he was there, and he's doing different sketches of it, looking for what he's looking for. And this was the finished version of the painting, a close-up of it. And it was just taking the hopes, wants, and desires. And I asked Dylan permission to talk about one of his pieces. And he said yes, but I don't think he knew what I was going to say. So it's too late now. So if Dylan pitches in here, just mute him, okay? Because I know Dylan's listening and I saw his name pop up. So when Dylan finishes something and he finishes this drawing, this is a painting from Africa. I think it was Zimbabwe. And the number is staggering. I don't remember if it was 70 or 90% of the people have AIDS. 70% of the kids are orphans because of the parents died of AIDS. And the child is looking back at the mom as a shadow on the wall. The shadow is so big, it's becoming this daunting thing that's bigger than him. And yet there's a light on the other side that would allow him just to turn the corner. All he has to do is take a step this way, but he's looking back this way. So often when we see our problems, we only face our problems straight on, and that's all we look at, and we don't see the light. So when you're looking at your own shadow, sometimes you just have to turn around and face the light. So Dylan wrote this when he finished the painting and was ready to start. I need to get the words up here. I know you can read, but I want to read it. Barred is my heart, a wall which no one can penetrate, an impenetrable fortress. Who can take this wall down? A wall laid brick by brick, hurt by hurt, day by day, loss by loss. I darkened the hopes, wants, and desire words, the opposite of them, the fear words, and then despair. In this impenetrable fortress, my hiding place, my soul silently cries. Will this heart ever be safe? Must I lay more stones on my wall? Will abandonment encamp around me? Or will the black arrows of loss and despair make it over my wall? I can't feel anything. This wall is good. I don't feel anything. Maybe I'm safe now. Oh, but my soul cries silently within my fortress. Why does my soul cry? Why does it ache? I don't feel the arrows now. Is anyone out there? I cannot see. Did anyone smile at me? I could not tell. Is anyone out there? How will I ever know? I'm in this impenetrable fortress, a wall of brick and stone. I think I'm safe now. So why does my soul cry? Because I'm so alone. So when Dylan has processed his painting all the way through, he writes these incredible lyrics or words or things that go with it. He's gifted in ways I've never seen. He has a heart like is unbelievable. It's just a truly special person. But Dylan shared the same story that I share. You see, Dylan was in my class when he was young. There's been arguments over his age with his mom, but I don't listen to her. I thought he was 11 or 12. She said 10 or 11. And I didn't think his drawing was very good, but the mom defended him saying it was good for a 10-year-old. And I'm thinking, yeah, but he's going to be playing with people like me in the real world of the art world, and he's not good enough. So he needs to stay in the art class. So Dylan wants to learn how to do watercolor. Their family wants to live in Florida, and they move from Atlanta, and he learns to do watercolor. He's on the National Geographic cover as a child prodigy, and just special. I mean, the kid, he's just amazing. And at 18, Dylan stops painting, and his family moved back to Atlanta, and his mom popped in the studio, and she said, you know, Dylan stopped painting. I said, I know, I follow him. Just like I follow all of those people who leave me. I have your emails, I'll hunt you down. And so I told her my story. And I told her it was about telling a story with the art mapping. And Dylan joins the class and spends, you know, to be honest, I don't know what it is. I think it was 4 to 6 years. He did all the color exercises. And I told Dylan, I can't teach you how to do watercolor, but I can teach you the color theories and all this stuff in oil. So Dylan does, for the next X amount of years, all the paintings in oil paint, knowing he's going to be a watercolorist when he's one of the top oil painters in the world. And then he spends the next X amount of years, I don't know how many years, doing his own things like this and whatever it is. And we develop a great friendship, and he's just a tremendous friend and special person. So we shared the same story. You have a child prodigy, I wasn't, but you have a child prodigy, one of the greats in the world who quit art. And I feel like it's my job to share. Now, Kathy Kolowitz also said that she, with the loss of her son, she felt like art and drawing. This is in The Mother and Child, the loss of the mother and the child. And she said drawing was a social obligation. She had to share with people what it was like to deal with and confront that pain and that sorrow. And I think that's my job too, is to show you how to do this. So how does Sargent do some of this? Well, one of the reasons is Sargent didn't have a camera. So every time Sargent does a drawing and a sketch and a drawing and a sketch, and I don't know how many El Halejo sketches he does. I mean, he does, I don't know how many dancers, Spanish dancers, 3 or 4 of them. Do you know this picture actually changed? Now let me pull up my, oh, there it is. I lost my drawing tool. There we go. Do you know this picture actually, oops, right here. This picture used to be this right here. Big white billowy dress. And someone, they did an x-ray of it and you could see the white and it had lead in it. So when the black was over it, they could see he changed the painting. You see, when the painting was vertical like this and horizontal and these big round shapes, you're going to repeat shapes to create harmony. That's what you're going to do. That's just habit. Whatever you do first, you're going to repeat it. I don't care who you are. He works on this painting for 3 years. Now, let me back up here for a second. When Sargent was a child and he drew every day with his mom would not let him start a new painting until he finished the drawing he was working on. You know why Sargent never phoned home during this? Because he was working on this painting for 3 years while he was doing other paintings. He couldn't figure out what it was and what it was about. And it had to torment him. He even wrote about the torment that went on with this painting. It's because he wasn't phoning home. He didn't want to lie to his mom. So when Sargent finishes the painting, and there's a few things to look at here. You see, wherever you put contrast tells you where to look. Right here, oops. Right here. El Jalejo means something like reverberating sound. The whole place is rocking. But you see, there's no contrast on the hand clapping. What happened to sound? You see, Sargent, when he gets rid of this round area and makes this diagonal, I think he sharpens all the diagonal lines. Put contrast there. Blurs all the horizontal lines. Horizontal means calm, diagonal means action. Blurs the horizontals and says this is about the dance. 3 years it agonized over him. So I can't tell you how 100 paintings I must have in the attic that are horrible. I'm tired of horrible paintings. The art mapping keeps that from happening now. And that's the part I'm trying to stress with you. So one of the things I do first, so I'm going to just go through some of the steps quickly. I crop it. Is this diagonal for Venice, Burano, or is this horizontal? And I crop it and I crop it and I crop it. And I'm looking for what is it in this picture that's catching my eye? What is it? And then how does it make me feel? So there's the key. So imagine you have this 18 by 24 sketch pad. And every time you say, no, it's not this, write down why it's not. And when you say, yes, it's this, write down why it's not. Don't edit it. Just write your thoughts and just write. Trust me, you just write. That's all you have to do. And, you know, when I'm looking at this, is this the horse that's overlooking the whole pasture? Or is this the horse that's power and strength? What is it? Just write it. There's 50 or 60 things I ask myself about art. Just do one at a time. Eat the elephant one bite at a time. Don't try to figure this whole thing out in one swoop. It's like Dylan. You do all these sketches one at a time. Sargent did. Oh, I know. We're better than him. We don't have to do it. You see, we rely on that photograph so much, we think we can just alter the photo a little bit. But what we're losing in the translation are all the studies and sketches, is that familiarity to what's inside your heart, why this is affecting you, and why you're attracted to it. This is about you. Now, I am a person of faith, so here's where I can lose a few people. I believe this is where God shows me where I am as a person. That's what I believe. And that's the part I want to share. I just want you to have your voice in art and not someone else. So things that I talk about and things that I do are, I call it the micro, macro, and mini micro. I made it up, so don't go Googling it. So the macro part of this is right here. I choose a few areas that describe this lonely cowboy. You know, he's the last cowboy. He's the end of the cowboys. And this is the last fence post he's ever going to put up. Normally, the fence post goes on for 100 miles, 1,000 miles. This is the last fence post. His job is done, and his way of life as he knows it is over. Welcome to retired age, huh, Chuck? Yes. So you find the few places. That's the macro. The micro, I believe, there's a sequential, and there's a sequential order in these places that you want me to look. The micro is within it, there's certain things that you want me to look in a sequential order also. Every time you pick a place, you write down why. Add it to your 18 by 24 sheet. Every time you do a step, you add y. Now, why is this so important for me? It's a couple ways. So many artists start drawing by putting shapes in. It's a great way to draw. It is fantastic. But half of the world in my class, I teach 250 students a week for the last 25 years. Now, since COVID, we're down to 100 and something. I don't know what it is. I'm afraid to count, but at least we're up and running. So what happens now is when half of my class is able to draw this positive shape and draw this shape. Okay. Oh gosh, I just realized with the picture there, you get to look at to see if my shape is right. I didn't plan on that one. Oh, well, it's kind of okay. Sorta. Oh, I think I cut his shoulder off, but that's okay. You get the idea. Okay. So there's my guy and there's his shape. Well, back to Sargent. You see, whatever line you put in first, you're going to repeat. You put a diagonal in, you're going to put in other diagonals to go with the message. You put in red, you're going to find other colors that go good with red. You put in gray, you're going to find colors that look good with that gray. Whatever you put in, you're going to repeat. So for me, putting in shapes could hurt your painting because some of the shapes I don't even want in the painting and I'm not going to bring attention to them. So a lot of you know Megan McCall, and you may not know when she was just a little kid, her aunt or someone took a photograph and we saw it and I said, let me paint that. And it's a little hour-and-a-half sketch. Okay, that's code word for saying I'm afraid of being measured up. I don't want to say it's a finished painting. It's only an hour-and-a-half sketch. See, I protected it by hour-and-a-half sketch. But no, it is finished and I love it. And it really does look like Megan. She had this like, I don't know, it looked like her. So Megan had some difficulty getting pregnant. And a friend of hers took this photograph, incredibly talented photographer, just spectacular. And I've always loved this. And I said, gosh, this would be beautiful. Because when I started painting again, I had no portfolio. So I figured I need to paint anything and this would be amazing. I've yet to get around to it, but I've been working on it a little at a time. So what happens in the picture, one of the first things I do is called a seeking drawing. I don't have the ability. I've been in art now since 1980. I'm not going to do math, but it's a while. And I don't have the ability to look at a drawing and find the line I'm going to repeat. I call it a seeking drawing. So I usually start by drawing and I don't lift the pencil up, you know, and here's my seeking drawing. And this won't really show it nicely, but you just start on the edge. Well, I'll have to start out here. You just start on the edge a little bit and I just draw in these little shapes and the shadows and this curve, and you're looking for all these lines and you're looking for the line that inside you jumps up and says, that's it. That's what I'm going to repeat. And that's the line that's catching my eye. And when I looked at it, it was one of the lines with the least amount of contrast. I loved the shoulder line and the softness and the femininity. That was my seeking line that I was going to repeat through the whole painting. I'm not letting, oops, can't go back and forth with that. I'm not letting the shape dictate that. So when you draw shapes, all of a sudden you just found a line that you may not want in the picture. So there's two ways to draw. The French Academy taught how to measure and draw things where you drop a line down. It's called a plumb line, you know, oops. You know, you drop a line down and you start measuring and you see where things are and you start measuring these things. And, you know, we have a whole thing that we go into that with, and I don't have time for that. So I had to draw it that way. But when I do a seeking drawing, I don't even measure. I'm just drawing. There is no measuring. I don't want my conscious part of the brain getting in the way of this. I'm looking for something inside. There's two parts of your frontal lobe. One is creativity, and the other is this, am I wearing my shirt right? Am I saying the right thing? I need that creativity to slide over and start to work. And they showed with these CAT scans that when you're setting up your tools and everything, the self-actualization side is lit up like a Christmas tree, and the creativity part of that frontal lobe is dormant. And then when you get into the frontal lobe, it's lit up and the creativity is shut down. They don't work simultaneously. So I need to get into that side that works without me thinking about it. And so I just start drawing without measuring, and I'm looking for the line, and then I'm going to repeat it. So anywhere else I could have, maybe there's a straight line, I'm going to curve that line a little bit, similar to this. So now I'm going to help it a little bit anywhere I can. So the seeking line is the first thing. Once I find the seeking line, I then have to take my 1824 notepad and say, why? Why do I like this femininity? And for Megan, this was God's promise. She'd always had in her heart to have a child, and now God, and she'd had trouble repeatedly with certain things, and now they're beyond the scary part, and she's about to have a baby. And well, I don't know how pregnant she is there, but it's going to happen, and the gold represents God. So I started, you know, when I'm finally finished all of my stuff, and I wrote down everything I'm going to write down, and I just keep writing sentences after every time I do something. Then I start to take those sentences, oh, here's where God's warmth and his light is hitting her and bathing her, and you know, and then this is for you, and you're not alone. And you know, it was a surrender to prayer. And there were just different things I was writing about Megan that I was going to put in certain areas. And you know what that would tell me now? If this area represented God's love, what kind of medium would I use? Would I use embolio gel or stand oil to flatten out the strokes? Would I use impasto medium to show texture? Would I use a bristle brush to show texture? Would I use a synthetic brush to flatten it out? Or would I use a sable for a little detail? It would tell me what kind of color scheme to use. It would tell me how much contrast do I need. All of these things are important for me to capture my message. Once I have clarity to what I'm after, then I know what to do, and I'm not afraid to show the client. So let me keep going. City of Refuge. I was doing a photography shoot for a downtown Atlanta area. And this is my seeking drawing for this. And again, I'm not measuring, I'm just winging the drawing as I go. I draw very lightly. I do not lift my pencil off the brush. I'm not measuring. And anytime I see a line, I think, wow, that's cool, I darken it. So I'm doing this with a 3B pencil. This is only the line I'm going to repeat. This does nothing else for me. And then I write down what happens and why. And what came to my head was the difficulty of living in this harsh environment for her. And she was seeking help. And I was there as a photographer asked to dictate or depict that I want to be part of someone else's story. And that was going to be the photo shoot. This was the first photo. He was telling me what to do. I had to ask him to move so I could take this picture while he was talking to me. Okay. So this is during one of our Zoom classes on Thursday, and we were talking about this Remington show I had just seen in Washington, D.C. And we were talking about the line and the movement that you're trying to find in this picture. And what sculpture is so different than oil painting is from each angle, it depicts a different feeling. Well, gosh, in painting, I have enough trouble doing it in just one angle. This is like in 3D around. You got to make sure every angle. But in this angle, you see the horse and his strength and this curling power. And here you feel like the guy's flying off, and you can see the lines you might repeat with these curves and these S curves through the painting as you start to repeat these S curves. And the diagonal line of this, or this hard bucking corner, or maybe these diagonals this way that you would find to show the horse. And every angle, it's a little different, and it's a little different line that you would depict. It doesn't matter whether I'm right or not. It just matters that when you do the drawing, what do you see and what do you want to depict? This is your drawing. This is your painting. This is your story. This isn't my story. This is about you. other things. And as you find it, you continue to write down on the side of your 18 by 24. Eventually you'll have your whole 18 by 24, half of it will be text. You know, we all know about radial lines. They lead you into the painting. They create depth, they establish a foreground, middle ground, and background. They create some dynamics, you know. But, you know, when you look at Sargent's paintings, he's aware of this. This is not something that he goes without knowledge. This is painted in his studio, by the way. He hires these models. He paints 6, 7 of these people individually, and he orchestrates it in his room. So, Anne, I need a favor. Look up at your ceiling. Do you see clouds? I doubt he did either. These clouds, that's a radial line telling you where to look. Here's another radial line telling you where to look. Where the blue water is happens to lead you right here. Everything is telling us to go right here. Do you know what that means? That means there are no edges taking you anywhere other than that. And then you would write why. So let me show you some radial lines that Sargent used in his drawings. And I have to open something up. Hold on. I got to open a folder. Uh-oh. It may not let me open the folder. This wasn't planned. I'm going to stop share screening. And then I'm going to see if I can screen share another way. Oh, Finder might work. Okay, you can see my Finder?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Ooh, now you get to see my lack of organizational skills. Art mapping, 21. These are all the things I think about. And each day I add more. And then I write about them. Radial lines. Here's Sargent's. So I have to keep it in Finder, so I can't just zoom in now. So I'll just do a couple at a time. Okay. I like to use a radial line as a welcome mat, so to speak. Okay. What Sargent's saying is, I'm inviting you into the painting here. Here, walk on, you can't walk on water. So walk on the little boat here, and I'm going to take you right here to the other side. Here's the door. Come on in, enter the painting. You know, so here's the shadow, enter the painting. Usually something goes off the page in the bottom, like a person. This is the way in, folks. Follow the path, or a shadow. Or the man, okay, the hermit, you know, you got the little walkway right here. Come on in, let's go here. And then he blends it into the mountains to take us into the mountains, into the journey. Oh, I think this is Sargent himself. Someone may have painted, or he's painting someone else, but he's allowing us to enter into the painting. Here we go again, more people off the foreground. Then we follow the diagonal lines. It leads us to the smoke, and up we go. He's got these little stick here leading us into the girl and meandering in. Again, the fronds or whatever the palm tree thingies are, and he's bringing us into the painting. Oh, just follow the red brick road right there into the painting. These are called radial lines, and they allow you to enter the painting. And this is blatant. And you know why it's blatant? Because I'm going to show you paintings where he doesn't do it. So here's the carpet. I want you to enter into the painting. Usually it's in a diagonal, which is more of that Rubens kind of Baroque excitement and drama and something going on. But it's one painting after another where he's got a rock or something letting us in to enter the painting, a shadow. Okay, here's a problem. There's a fence line right here. I'm not allowed in. Like maybe this beautiful park is here, but I'm stuck on this side. Now that may not have been intended, but that's the result of what's going on. Okay, here it is again, another fence. I want to go fly fishing in this river here, but it's private property and the fence doesn't let me in. You know, I'm doing a series of paintings of President Carter, And one of the things that has been driving me is one of the paintings in his own life.
Hey, Margaret, it just kind of froze.
Oh, you can't hear me?
I can hear you.
I think it may be your computer, Donna.
Okay. So what happens here is with this painting, President Carter has a painting called The Pasture Gate. And it's a picture of a pond and a beautiful house on a pond, but a gate with a closed thing there. And he tells this story one day of he was running with his friends, and one day they stopped, and they were way ahead of him. And they stopped and they waited for him to go through the gate first. And I don't know if it was years later or when. I don't remember what was said there, but it dawned on him in the past or whatever, that at that moment, that's where there was a social injustice in his life, and it started driving his political beliefs. And it was because of, the white guy had to go first. So someone had spoke to them. And that's what's going on in this picture when I'm not allowed to enter into the painting. So you can see all these pictures where he lets us in, and these are called directional lines, and they're radial lines. It's a boat letting you in. And it's one after another. There's a boat right here in Venice. Okay, so it's not, oh, I'm at the Grand Canal and this is the Bridge of Sighs, and I can see them here. Oh, no. Sargent's in this boat. I'm part of this. He's telling you more about this scene. And that's what's going on. If you learn to look and break it down, it's a vocab. These art tools are just that. They're not rules. Do I need a directional line to move my eye through the painting or not? Does it help me? And if it does, why? You write it down, and you write down why. He uses the carpet to lead you into the painting. Another boat, to the shadow, to the boats. Oh, the glasses, the table. It's deliberate. And after a while, you get the hint. So I'm going to step out of there. Okay, now I think I can change my screen share back to the PowerPoint. So those are radial lines. And then the other option, now don't Google this, I made this up, is not. So there's radial lines or there's not. You either are allowed to enter the page or you're not. And Sargent's under the influence of Manet. See, he's in Paris, and Paris is exploding with a lot of thoughts at this time. Manet's painting is revolutionary for two reasons. One, there's no really foreground, middle ground, background. It's a shallow depth of field. The other thing is Manet has us jumping from highlight to highlight to highlight. And in this painting, the world is learning that you jump from white highlight to highlight to highlight. So when Sargent does this, oh, I had the diagonal folder. I already showed that. So here you have this picture of this lady, or better yet, this one. Okay, so what does this mean if you don't let me in and she's just off in the distance? Maybe it's a personal thing and she's just not going to share her personal thoughts. That would be a reason not to allow me to enter in close to you, and you could stay at a distance. So El Jalejo is an homage to Manet because it's really getting you to jump from highlight to highlight to highlight, and it's a limited spatial distance, all going on at the same time. When I first saw this painting, I lost there it is. I saw something in a magazine and I haven't been able to find it since. There's an X-ray on this painting, of this painting, and they noticed that right here was all white because of the lead white in the X-ray. Do you know what that created? A fence line. Oh, let me do it in red. So this person commissioned this painting, And actually, that's not there. There's a tree here, and they're all the same size. So that was for the painting. So this fence line was keeping us from entering Ivanhoe Park. And now Constable's famous for being the first one to go outside and paint outside. Let's copy nature the way it is. One problem with copy nature the way it is even if you measure and you say, okay, I'm going to measure. So any line, when you're measuring something and you do a reflection, whatever height that is, the reflection is the same size. If an object like a pylon in the water is standing straight up, it's straight up and down. If it's going at an angle this way, your reflection is shorter. If it's coming toward you, your reflection, it still has to be straight, but your reflection is longer. So these trees are straight. So this would have been the actual drawing and the correctness of the drawing. He changed it. So when I look at that, it always reminds me of that fence line. So when I look at these Sargent paintings right here, I see a fence line there. And I don't know if he did that on purpose or just something you do early on, or you just think it looks good and you don't know what's wrong with it. Here's something I'm starting to work on. And it starts a composition called closed composition, open and closed. So a closed composition, no, that's out of place. Ignore that. So back to the limited depth of field. This is a limited depth of field. We were in New York, and this guy's trapped. There's nowhere to go. There's no social mobility for him. That depth of field keeps that from happening. If I crop some of this foreground, it might let him come off the page and still be able to go this way. Or if I crop away this beam and just zoom in too much, if I just go like this and I crop the painting here, it might change the whole feeling of the painting. Or maybe make it a horizontal and don't put the beam in and just the silver go across, then it becomes a different kind of painting. So again, every time you answer one of these questions, you write down why. It could be a landscape. It's not about foreground, middle ground, background. It's about reading up and down, left and right. How would this painting changed if he put in a foreground, middle ground, and background? What if he put a window in showing something, or had her outside showing the trees off into the distance? What does that do? There's another thing that happens with this, and that is, I have to go back to my other screen. I thought it was a closed composition. Oh. Closed composition. No, I lost it. I moved everything before the talk. That may not have been a good thing. So there's another type of composition as I'm looking, and that is where in the past, all the old masters, I can't find it, all the old masters used to tell a complete story. So maybe I can find it with,
Down, it's close.
there was a different one. It said Sargent closed. I titled it something different that I wasn't looking for and didn't know what it was. So basically what happens with a lot of the old master pictures is everything in that story is complete. So like you have this, let me see if I can find one. In this picture, which is called Open, you see how it looks like it's a close-up of the boating party, but when the people are cut off, it comes off from the Impressionist. It makes it look like it keeps going, and that's called an open composition. and you have all these open compositions, and how would that your painting change? And you write the reason how it would change and what it would do differently. Sargent's cutting off the girl's head here and the guy's head, making it seem like the entire cantina is erupting. You know, if I look at this and say, okay, this is an open composition of a man in Pakistan. I think we were in Karachi. And the other picture here, I went ahead and cast a shadow on it just to see if that would make it look closed. Psychologically, how does this make this feel compared to the other one? Does this limit his possibility of something looming over him? Does it change the message? So whenever you're painting, it's a simple little question. It has nothing to do with talent. Open or closed. And you write why. Okay, so let me back up and go back to this other stuff that I skipped. I just pretend I didn't skip anything. The next thing I do first is I try to figure out my shades. I take 3 or 4 values and I do a no-tan. I'm just trying to figure out how light, dark, medium, everything's going to be. I'm just working out little sketches. This is someone in the class. Is it high key? Is it low key? That's high key. Is Sargent's high key or is it low key? Okay, well, Joseph, Mary, and the Christ child, this is low key. Why? Psychologically, it changed the message. So you write it down. This is about you writing all the time. One of the big indicators, though, is this. You know, when you see a round object, every plane changes direction. It's a different shade of values. But there's 2 value scales that go on in the world. You know, I've been teaching this value scale where it's what we call a linear value scale. Each value is a different variation and a different value. The Lambert Law of Physics basically says, this is a law of physics. Mine is just a made up value scale. The value scale, or the Lambert law, is that the light areas, the sunny side, stays lighter for a much longer and larger percentage before it drops off into shadow drastically and quickly. So 90% of your value scale is light, and then it just drops off the chart. That's what happens under a certain light every time. And that's important, except here's the problem with that. John Singer Sargent said, there's a true halftone on each plane. A halftone originally started, before that sentence, there would be the highlight, the halftone, the shadow, and the core shadow, and the reflective light. And the halftone was the true color or the true value of the object. And when you drew a box, the halftone would always be the dark on the light, that's this value, and the light on the medium right here. And this would be your true color every time. But Sargent's not saying that. And the reason he's saying it is there's an addition to this, and he spots it. He said there's a true halftone on each plane. So what do I mean by that? Or better yet, what does Sargent mean by that? Well, since he's not talking to me, and that should be a good thing for my wife, I divide the value scale, or when I make a box in a light, medium, and dark side to make something look three-dimensional, I don't have the values equally spaced. Depending on your psychological message, you change the size of your values. You see, if 1 and 2, the lighter values, are taking up a predominant area, like Lambert, and then you make your darker values, your 12s, 11s, and 10s take up most of the area, so it looks like this one, it looks incredibly realistic. But what if you have a baby sleeping? Or someone hiding in the shadows, and there's a sadness and quietness and there's no movement, and you want to just paint it flat and soft. Then I'll have my medium values larger and my medium darks larger and my darks very little. And you're psychologically changing the painting depending on your message. And I think that's why for years, and this is an apology for all the people in my class for years when I would argue with them, I have 2 apologies. Let's get them out of the way right here. The first argument was I'd always say it isn't dark enough, and they'd look at someone else and say, mine's as dark as yours. And then they think I didn't like the person and I was picking on them because I was just saying it wasn't dark enough. I now realize that it was the percentage of area wasn't big enough. And therefore that plane wasn't reading dark enough. So I didn't have favorites. I didn't know what I was after. I'd memorized what you could get away with, but I didn't know why. Which brings me to my other apology to students in the past. I'm sorry I was so ornery and insecure and hard-headed and stubborn. I'm sorry. It's just that. I have no excuse. I was insecure and I knew you had to do this, but I didn't know why. I didn't put any of these pieces together, but I knew I could teach you. If you learned how to shade beautifully, if you learned how to see and could measure, if you learned the color theory, I could equip you with the tools. It wasn't until recently, the last 3, 4, 5 years, that I've started to put all these pieces together. So now when I'm challenged, I don't get defensive and upset. I now realize, oh, I just have to do a better job explaining this. And it's on me. So I'm not going to repeat this. I apologized by once. That's it. Don't get your hopes up, Anne. You all know how to make something look realistic and flat, right? You see, if I go back to this, the greater difference in values, the more realistic it is. That means if I want to make her look realistic, have more values on her face, paint her flat. Try to keep the photograph in a painting flat. No changes in value, simplify your values, and have a wider range in values on the object you want to be realistic. I think this is cool. I just saw this on Facebook and stole it. So when you do break down your paintings, it's not the lights and darks really that do this. It's the halftone in the middle that determines your message. How would Beardstat's painting change if he starts darkening these medium grays? Well, the darker they get, the more powerful and exciting this is. And it's no longer peaceful and calm, it's exciting. So that halftone thing. So here's a drawing I did, and this is how I start it. You know, I take a cotton ball, it takes me about 10, 20 minutes, and I take a cotton ball and I block it in, and I establish the value. I'm after the halftone for my planes. And then I start to draw it in, hoping my highlights are in the right spot, because it's hard to get them white if they're not. And then I start to draw it in and I start to work on it. I'll do it in Lightroom first, and then I get started. Okay, so let me ask you something. This is called a closed composition. So there's open and closed. A closed composition is when you have these walls on the edges and you don't let the viewer leave, right? This is closed. The viewer can't leave the painting. You put wall here, you put a beam here, a flag, they're stuck, they're held captive. Whatever you're painting, when you're painting a portrait, should it be open or closed? How easy is it to make something open or closed? All I'd have to do is darken this edge a little bit in 10 seconds with one stroke, not even recognize what I did, and it would change the whole message. That instead of this child having anything as her possibility, I could close that in her in seconds and not even realize I did it. So when you answer the open or close, you do it and you say why, and you write it down. So I went to the Webster's and I wrote some of this down. You know, the proscenium arch is this kind of picture frame that we look through, and it was all in theater, and they used to have these arches that you look through. So your painting is this picture that you're looking into. But here are some of the closed things: having boundaries enclosed, a corridor between buildings, blocked or barred passage or entry, explicitly limited, restricted, a closed membership, self-contained, self-sufficient, a closed relationship, blocked against entry, shut, pressing together by stopping, to end, finish, to conclude, to complete, the depths around me, using walls, trees, buildings, shadows, clouds, closed, Rembrandt's paternal prime. So when I say closed composition, psychologically, that could impact my painting. It's not just a closed composition. It could change my rights. My freedom, my whatever, my hope, my desires could be trapped, or it could be protection and safety, depending on how I use the contrast. Open or closed, and I'm just asking you to say why. This is not a talent thing. This is a simple knowledge. Do you know this? And do you apply this with each painting? And if you don't need it, don't use it. This is easy. They're not rules anymore. When Anne was in the class, they were rules. You know, there's a lot of people in Zoom. I don't know how many, but I saw it was the number was getting high. I only see 6 faces, so I only see the same names because I see the 6 names. I don't understand that. Rembrandt's Return of the Prodigal Son, his negative space is so close to the figures, like the sky here, that's a closed composition. It doesn't have to be a beam. How about the fence in this incredible Stephen Scott Young? You know, her flowers are on this side of the fence, and this enormous white wall is behind her. This is where she is. And the size of her, you know, when kids are gangly and they're young and they're kind of long, our kids would go wide and then up and then wide and up. You know, you get certain ages, and she has this thinness, and it really does depict the rural South Carolina low country, you know, that rural poverty South. It's a powerful piece. All the flowers are between the 2 fences. Okay, here's Sargent's painting, closed composition. Why? Well, maybe because this is Venice and where he saw it, but what would it be like if I got rid of this wall and had it open? It was a huge piazza. Then all of a sudden, the shadow of these men lurking here, there'd be no looming, no staring, no eye contact. See how the painting could change? And the negative space being close to her arm here. You put a wall there or a column, that could change the whole painting. He's doing it with the flowers. He's coming up the edge here, he's coming across, and he's coming down. He's even doing it on the edge of the chair and the chair on the other side. So it's just you and her. How would your painting change? And you write it down if you close the pose of that client. How about open, where it just continues and goes on and just continues everywhere? You know, it just goes on for miles and miles. You're painting a portrait of a child who has unlimited possibility, the hope. You know, sometimes it's because you're cutting off the figures, sometimes it's not. Sargent cuts off the figures here with the lady and the man. The closing of the composition with the shadow. I don't have time to go into the compositional choices, but this is the best way to say it as a photographer. You put something in the middle. It doesn't mean don't put something in the middle. It means it's static. My life hasn't changed. There's no movement. You start to move it a little way. It's the golden mean, golden section. It's the golden mean. Here's a hint of movement, but not much. The rule of thirds. Closer to the edge, the more dynamic. So this is a chart. The farther to the right you go, or left, the farther from the center, the more dynamic. Where are you putting that model you're painting? Your choice. And write down why. Why does it matter? How does it change? The next part I want to talk about quickly, hopefully, because I only have 150 more slides to go. I kind of over-prepared. I'm sorry. So what happens is these are Sargent's academical drawings, his first years or year or two while at the French Academy. Drawing from life, this guy could draw. I mean, check out the perspective in this. The drawing is beautiful. So now we're going to go back to the next sentence. Every time he'd leave something out of the painting, you know he had the ability to put it in. Why did he take it out? How does that affect his painting when he took it out? How would it affect your painting? Are you leaving too much in it? And is it causing harm? What Durand said. So painterly is when you lose and find an edge. And we know Sargent just loses most of his edges. I mean, just edges just gone. Not even sure he paints some of them. You know, you're just losing edges where the shoulder disappears and the hair disappears and things disappear and are just el gano is the Italian phrase. Just can't even find some of these things or know what they are. Okay, Sargent's painting of the hermit and the 5 deer. I'm messing with you. You know, it's Where's Waldo? Now you're trying to count deer. Let's look like Quang Ho's picture of the lady outside bathing. We'll skip that. So we'll move on. Here's a painterly painting. You're only finding the places that tell your story. See, that's what bothered me for years. What edge do I find and why? How do I just feel it? Well, what if I said the macro, And then the micro is, okay, in the nose, name the spots that identify her likeness, her mood, or her emotional feeling. Find the spots that tell me that story with the mouth. Tell me where these places are, which they are. And when you find them, write it down. This is about you getting a full sheet of why every time you answer this stuff. Okay, Sargent. Now, I saw you draw, so surely you can refine the hand a little more than this, unless it wasn't needed. You know, we all think of Vermeer as a realist, but you know, some of his edges are a little on the soft side. This is the woman with a pearl earring. He doesn't have half the eyeball here. I don't know where the nose is, and I'm not sure the lip even shows up. Here's the earring. So let me get this right. He put a little dark in the corner here, a little reflective light and a highlight, and he said, I'm done. Sargent does this all the time. Linear paintings are the opposite of painterly. A linear painting is very common in the 1780 to 1880. Jerome, Bouguereau, Ang, and you have the Coronation of Napoleon. A linear painting is when you find all of the edges and it activates a tactile quality of touch and smell. So he wants us to feel the fabrics, to feel the gold, to feel the materials, and to be impressed in it. With her, it's her femininity, the birth of Venus. It's the softness of her skin. Now, because you are doing something linear, it doesn't excuse you from the figure ground where you're lighter and darker than the background. So you see where she's darker than the background, then lighter, then darker, then lighter, then darker, then lighter, then darker and lighter and darker. You still got to do that. You just don't lose it in between. You never lose the figure ground, Ann, because now I know you're painting. I'm going to look you up in Facebook and be watching, Ann. I'm watching. Linear paintings, the marble, you're feeling what the marble looks like with the texture in this watercolor by Sargent. Lady Agnew, or Madame X rather, you know, it's her flesh. His greatest contrast is in her chest. She's looking away so you can check her out. And she's looking for a long time away. And he's found all of her edges. So it's about her texture of her skin. This lady was taking arsenic so her skin would be whiter. This is the same guy who painted this stuff and left everything out. And in Carnation, Lily, Lily, Rose, he finds every edge of every flower. And that's linear. Linear activates the tactile quality of touch and smell. Every flower is found. He wants you to smell the garden. He wants you to know what it's like in the summertime. And you can smell the Bermuda grass and the flowers. And it's just a certain time of night that's lighting up. Another category is complexity and simplicity. Do you put everything in? Is that person obsessive compulsive? Do you need everything in the picture? Or do you simplify it and let it go? Sargent paints a president of the United States and paints him flat. And I said for 20 years, could you imagine having the president's portrait and you'd have to paint him flat? And you know all this stuff to how to make it realistic. And you have to leave everything you know on the bag. When I painted President Carter, the thing that makes my painting the most realistic is my knowledge of how to use a figure ground relationship. And I had to leave it out of the painting. And all these years I've been saying, you know, I don't know how Sargent could paint a president and leave everything he knows out of the painting that would make it realistic. And I asked the class, do you have the gumption to leave out all you know? He doesn't need all this stuff. Roosevelt was one opinion, his, and that's it. Boom, black and white, shape. That's what this painting's about. Don't need the rest. I threw this in real quick. I thought it was really interesting. It's taking different focal lengths. So this is the psychic. They're making all this stuff up, folks. Okay. This is the repeated convicted felon. It's a different guy with a different focal length lens at a different angle. self-made millionaire. Something, I don't know what this one is, but it's something. And they're all different. When you take pictures of your portrait, of your commissioned person, are you aware of what the lens, the 50, the 75, the 85, do you know that an 85 millimeter does the minimum amount of distorting? I had the most fantastic 85 and I have even better 105 millimeter lens, and I returned the 105 because it had compressed the face a little bit and made the lady's face just a little fatter. And I don't think women like that. And I have enough trouble doing the portrait. I don't want the lens messing me up with the distortion. So also the angle, the height, and the positioning and the light all come into play. Coming down the home stretch. So what happens for Sargent is this. There's different elements of art: color, contrast, pattern, texture, and shape. He has to pick one element to carry the message. This is color. The man in the red smoking slippers and jacket. Not contrast, but color. Do you know if I took Cad Yellow Pale, Cad Yellow, Gamblin's Cad Orange, Winsor Newton's Cad Orange, Cad Scarlet, and Cad Red, see how brilliant the top row is? Do you know if I take Cad Yellow Pale to Cad Red, look at the orange you make from the mixture. You know, when you mix two colors together, you lower the intensity and make the color muddy. So when your color's about beautiful color, you better know what you're doing to it before you start, because you could be ruining the color before you even start. This is Cad Red Deep, Alizarin, Permanent Magenta, and Violet out of the tube. This is Ultramarine Violet to Cad Red. Look at the reds that you do when you mix. Look at the reds when you mix. I love it when someone says, oh, yeah, I paint with 3 to 5 colors. Do you want to see what it looks like? No, I already know what your painting looks like. Thanks. Careful, folks. When you need your paint of color about color, you might have to buy some colors. And Sargent could paint with the best of them because he was a watercolorist. Watercolor taught him transparent browns and burnt siennas and beautiful colors. But the color is about one painting. Daumier's Laundress is about this lady who has no, it's about those who have and those who don't. So here you have this laundress who goes to work before sunrise, works all day. At sunset, she walks upstairs, closed composition. She can't go anywhere. Her walk home is upstairs. At least it wasn't in the snow like mine was in Phoenix. Upstairs, the golden glory for Paris is not for her. She's headed the other way. It's a closed composition, and he's tying the foreground colors with the background as he closes the composition. Beautiful painting. Sargent painting Twilight. The color of this purple and the lavender and the color of this blue. And you know what happens at Twilight? The painting goes flat. Stop 3 sides to the box. We don't care about making it realistic. Keep it flat. It's Twilight. Everything goes flat in Twilight. That's why the floor is flat. It's not gradually getting darker farther away. There's not 3 sides to the tree. You put in what you need. And when you figure it out, you write down why. And you keep writing down why. Paintings about contrast are about light and dark. There's color in it, but light and dark carries the message. So when he's trying to show a painting about contrast, he's removing as much color as possible. So he does all these studies for El Jalejo. She ends up in black and white. Why? Maybe the color brought psychological message. Girl in a Spanish cantina in a red dress. What's that mean to you? She ends up in black and white because this is about the dance, and he didn't want you distracted. Paintings about contrast are finding the spots that tell the message. Look at all the soft edges that are gone. Half the things aren't even in the picture. You get back to shape, where the silhouetted shape finds all the edges, instead of contrast, where you only find a few. Paintings about shape, you don't need 3 sides to the box. You just have the silhouette. You know? In Asia, the girl in prostitution with the man looming over her, the shape is enough to tell the story. 1948, I think this is. I don't know who took it, but you see enough of the eyelid and the lip. enough of her and the hair, and you know everything you know about whatever you're trying to say. In this case, it was your husband could go to war and die for the country, but nothing's changed in this country. And this is a powerful photograph. The shape, the two little kids, all we need. Remember this guy, this girl, the guy who painted Kate Middleton, remember it? You know why no one liked it? Don't tell me talent. This is the guy's pencil drawing. This guy's as good as anyone in the world. This is why he missed it. In every picture released by the Crown, whatever it's called, their own photographers, she's full of big hair and there's a lot of contrast, and her big dark hair against the light is in everything. Here, the dark disappears, and this is about contrast and not shape. And that's why this disappears on him, because this guy's gifted. Sargent paints this about shape, but before he does it in watercolor. See, he thought it was about color. So with watercolor, he knows he has to put the right color down once the first time. The worst thing you can do for watercolor is to tone it one of these colors, or any painting. So he tones this blue painting brown, because brown does a horrible job to blue, just destroys the blue. And he tones it this brown gray color. So when he paints it blue, it doesn't look like this. His background started for a purpose. There was a reason he did this. And every time you do something, there should be a reason why. Texture, you know, you make a brush stroke, this is how I'm going to feel. You know, some beautiful strokes. I think if you learn to draw like this, you'll see your marks. You know, in this painting by Sargent, the texture was so thick. I was with someone, I think it was Dylan, and I said, I think I'm going to hang my keychain on the painting, but then I was afraid it would chip off and the alarm would go off, so I didn't do it, and I kept my keys in my painting. Some of the paint was sticking out from the canvas 1/4 of an inch. I'd never seen texture that thick. This was about a lady performer who was bigger than life. She filled the screen. Notice she's going off the page and the texture is exploding forward. He's telling you about her in the medium and the message and the texture he's using. And in the painting right next to it was the thinnest oil painting I've ever seen, done with like Marogger medium. Today we would use natural pigments oleo gel, because it's not fugitive and it never yellows. So the oleo gel would make this thin, wishy-washy. So here, this painting's incredibly thin and wishy-washy, where this one you could cut yourself on. They were sitting next to each other in the museum, or in the show. Why? And you write why and your reason. I can look at his painting and tell you that's with a bristle brush on dry paint. That's a sable brush. After he fanned it, you can see his fan brush going over it. And then he takes the sable brush over it. Now, whether he had a little medium in it, looks like he did. We would use oleo gel. Those sharp lines are done with sable brushes. Bristle brushes have a hard time making a sharp line. That's done while it's wet. Some of his marks are reserved for it to be dry. Some are done while it's wet. And other times he's doing it when it's dry. He's picking when he makes marks. He'll make contrast sometimes when it's wet, and then for variety, do it when it's dry. Why? And you write down why. But so often I see so many artists who paint the same way. And the textures, they're for sometimes to carry a message. And so I'm concluding now. Yay, I made it just in time, except for the talk time or questions. So right here, I'm back to Miyuki's incredible drawing. It's time for me, and I don't do this, and I want to do this. That's why we're doing it in my Zoom class on Thursdays, because that's on my heart for me to get better. I'm missing the brushstrokes and the texture. I want that in my art. I want to make a mark like my own student did here, where she showed the pain and the softness and the sensitivity. I want that in my art. I want you to use color and medium and texture, contrast and open or closed. And gosh, you know, I heard this on Rick Steves once, and I wrote it down while driving. Don't tell my wife. I wasn't texting. But there's this chef, and he said, he's talking about Italian cooking. And he's talking about how Piacere is the pleasure in every sense and not taken for granted. The pleasure to see you. I'm pleased to understand that someone loves you. Abbonamento is a form of pleasing combinations of colors, textures, and how things go together. The dietro is behind the scene. It's the wall. It's the 2x4s that were done with such amazing precision and craftsmanship before the plaster went over it and before the painting went on it. For the beauty of the plate and the purity and the goodness, that there's nothing that doesn't go in that plate that doesn't go, not a spice, not a sense, nothing. Refusing of impurities. We're going to do it one dish at a time, not to complicate the sense. That's what I'm hoping for the art class. Isn't that what Duran's telling Sargent?
Chris?
Yep.
Hey, Donna lost her internet connection
Okay.
a while ago, so I wanted to let you know this has been a great lecture, and I've been spellbound, and I'm sure everybody else has. If you want to stop your screen share for a minute, we can get other people on here and tell you thank you.
You know, I had too much to share. I couldn't reduce it. I don't know. I survived. You survived.
Oh, it's been great. Thank you.
Thank
spending
you.
all this
Thanks,
time
Chris.
and this effort.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was great.
Yeah, it was really great.
That was a
Very
milestone.
enlightening.
Thank you. Yeah,
Amazing.
loved it.
Wonderful.
Amazing.
Thank you, Chris. Anyone have a question?
Wonderful.
Awesome job, Chris.
That was
Congrats.
wonderful.
It was really fascinating. I mean, you could go on for hours.
Oh, no.
Watching this.
You don't know how long I could
Very
go.
mind
My
provoking.
class does, though. They know how long I could go. Hey.
Okay,
Okay.
David here saying wonderful,
Thank you.
wonderful.
Thank you. Bye.
9-9.
Thank you. Thank you.
It was
Bye.
great, Chris. It was
Okay.
great.
Me.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Right.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chris. I miss hearing your
Oh,
thoughts.
Oh,
Hey,
and
Dylan.
they recorded it. It'll be on their website.
Oh, good. I missed your talk so much. It's always so good.
Well, I'm hoping in the summer you join.
Good to see you, Dylan.